I want to go play football. Come on, Coach Wolfie. I want to go play football. Come on. You from Midland.
Story of my life. All right. Women's Open. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Office Hours. I'm your host, Michael Wolf. Show's presented by Hollins and Bourne and our good friends at No Laying Up. Speaking of our good friends at No Laying Up, there's been a character kind of hanging around campus this summer, a little summer school. Neil Schuster, The great Neil Schuster. Welcome to Office Hours. You're our first guest ever.
Mr. Wolfie, I didn't think I'd be in here. I thought school was out, but I love history. Nobody loves history more than me, and especially the history of national opens. And specifically today, you're going to tell me about the U.S. Women's Open.
Women's Open. It's kind of a crazy one, right? Compared to most of the other USGA events. You think of the USGA, pretty buttoned-down organization. They got their ducks in a row. They do. The women's amateur for the USGA started all the way back in 1896. Basically the same setup as the men's amateur and the men's open. They all started in 1895. I like the women's am. We'll talk about that real quick for just a minute because they got the best trophy. They got the Cox since 1896. It's the only USGA trophy that was donated by a non-American. Cox was a member of Parliament, and he was also a golf course architect. So there's the Robert Cox Trophy. It's gorgeous. Glenna Collette Vare won 6 times. She won 6 U.S. amateurs. We'll get back to her in a second. But yeah, U.S. amateur. It's at Bel Air this year. I'm looking forward to that.
Mr. Wolfie, one question. So USGA from the start ran both amateurs, the men's and the women's. Was that like their original,
They did. Open, 2 amateurs.
Okay.
The women's U.S. Open doesn't start until 1946. Why? There weren't any really women professional golfers. There just wasn't such a thing as professional women's golf with prize money and that kind of stuff. When the U.S. Open founded, here's where it gets a little interesting. It was actually founded by the Women's Professional Golf Association in 1946, the WPGA as it was called. The event got taken over by the LPGA when the LPGA was formed in 1950. So this was actually it was the only major for professional women at the start of the LPGA as we know it today. So LPGA runs it from 1950 until 1952. And I think at that point, everybody realized hey, if this is going to be the national championship, it really needs to be, run by the United States Golf Association. So USGA takes over the U.S. Women's Open in 1953. But unlike, for instance, the men's U.S. Amateur, they're going to apply all the victories retroactively. So USGA has only been running the U.S. Open since 1953, but they count all the winners from 1946. The big name then is obviously Babe Zaharias. I think everybody has probably heard the name. She's multi-sport athlete. She's in all those old-timey films, hanging around with Babe Ruth and folks like that. She's in the Olympics. She's also the GOAT golfer. One of those things where she kind of doesn't get her due in the record books for golf because they don't start the U.S. Open until 1946. Babe wins in 48, she wins in 50, and she wins in 54. Babe Zaharias was diagnosed with colon cancer in 1953. She has her intestines removed in 53. She comes back in 1954 and she wins her 3rd U.S. Open in 1954. And she dies basically the following year, early 1956, dead. So Babe Zaharias, when you see her in the record book, she only gets credit for 3 U.S. Opens, but she was definitely the GOAT.
Hell yeah! Talk about playing hurt. So she's the first woman's name on the Mount Rushmore. We've got. I
would say she's first one on the Mount Rushmore. She's then kind of succeeded. And again, it's kind of all bangers, all heavyweights. The first 2 decades of the U.S. Women's Open. Betsy Rawls wins 4 in the 50s, 51, 53, 57, 60. Mickey Wright comes in, 58, 59, 61, 64. Susie Maxwell Burning wins 3 of them, kind of end of the 60s into the 70s. And that kind of sustains, the event and the tour because it's big names.
It almost looks like the club champion boards when you walk into a country club and you look. It's like, oh my God, Betsy Rawls is just beating people up, man. She just dominated the 80s. What the hell? I wonder what she's like. I say that all the time when I walk into a club and I see it. A man or a woman just dominating the club championship. I want to meet that man or woman.
Yeah. Well, I can tell you, I've met Susie Maxwell Burning. I caddied for her. and I didn't know she won 3 U.S. Opens until the round was over. That very very nice lady who
Mr. Wolfie, I didn't know that either. So that makes 2 of us.
Yeah, it's like, I won 3. Okay.
Yeah.
3 U.S. Opens. That's a lot. That's more than everybody but about 6 people in history.
So like through the 60s, what do you think the field sizes are?
So you could pretty much just file an entry form and play in the U.S. Open, Women's U.S. Open, until like the mid 70s. So I think the first time they exceeded more than they had room for was like 1975, 76. They broke through like 200 entries. By the time they get into the 80s, it's like 500 ladies are trying to play every year. And then they broke through 1,000 in 2004. So they had 1,000 people try to play in it in 2004. In 13, they had 1,420 people. Last year, they had 1,879. And this year, they've had, last time I checked, they had 2,107 people register to try to qualify for the U.S. Open.
So we're growing the game.
We're growing the game. It's heavily, a lot of the growth has come from overseas players, which, makes sense. At the beginning, it was basically all Americans were playing, and, they'd get a couple Brits that would come over and visit. But for the most part, it's been the internationals that have been, fueling the growth to qualify for the U.S. Open. It's just like the men. So they've got full exemptions. They've got 36-hole qualifiers at 26 different sites. So there's not locals and then sectionals like the men. It's pretty much, you want to play in the U.S. Open, you got to get through 36-hole qualifier, 26 different sites where they're giving out like 80 spots. You got to have a 2.4 index for the women to try to play in a U.S. Open qualifier. And it costs $200 to try to play, same as the men. It costs $200 to play in a USGA professional Open.
One thing I love about the USGA is the qualifying stuff is black and white. I see it even on the local side. It's like, hey, you got to be this handicap, and then if you shoot, 98, we don't care.
We just ran out of holes.
What are the scores? Did we make it? Is it good?
We have to check.
I mean, if you're in, if you want to play, but otherwise, the rules are very simple, and I like that.
Yeah. So, U.S. Amateur for the women, obviously still awesome, but the women's U.S. Open has certainly taken on a lot of speed. Kind of symbolic this year, Pebble Beach hosting for the first time, right? That's going to be talked about a lot in the build-up, and it's noteworthy. It's Pebble Beach. It's, big deal.
Tell me a little bit about Pebble Beach. Why don't we start with the history of Pebble Beach? Why is Pebble Beach so famous?
All right. Pebble Beach is famous because it's beautiful. It looks awesome. It's one of the great golf courses. I think, it's also famous, at least among like major host sites these days, because it's one of the few that are left besides Pinehurst that is open to the public, right? Anybody can play Pebble Beach, and it's kind of been that way since the beginning. Pebble Beach has been pretty female friendly since the beginning. So Marion Hollins is this rich girl, really rich. Put up a picture of the house she grew up in right there. Looks like a castle. Marion was a baller. She raced horses, polo, swimming, tennis. She could do it all. She's runner-up in the U.S. Am at age 19. She wins the U.S. Amateur 1921. She also moves out to California, which was, it's a long way away in 1921. And she moves to Del Monte, Pebble Beach, Monterey area, and she basically becomes the cruise director for the Del Monte development out there that they're trying to get going. So she's in charge of kind of organizing athletic events and getting people to want to play and visit Pebble Beach in that whole area.
God, she sounds like Jordan Baker from Great Gatsby.
Yeah. I think that's, she's hanging around with the Vanderbilts. Walt Disney was a friend of hers.
I mean, after Gatsby goes down, she's just like, man, I'm out of here. I'm taking the train out west. This whole East Egg thing sucks. These people can't get out of their own way. Let's go start fresh. Good for her.
So Marion kind of bi-coastal too. So they put her up in an office like in downtown Manhattan. I was reading. Pretty good book here, by the way, about Marion Hollins.
Okay.
Champion in a Man's World by David Outerbridge, 1999. So they put her up in an office like in downtown Manhattan in pretty good marketing. They've got like these beautiful photos of the Pebble Beach area on the walls, and her rich friends would like come in to meet her for lunch and whatever. And what are you doing out on the West Coast? Like, what is this thing? And they'd see the pictures on the wall, and that was kind of her sales pitch to get people to go out there.
So does she help build the course, or the course is already built and she just is?
Yeah. So Pebble is developed It opens in 1918. It's a disaster. They got rocks in the fairways. It is not met with rave reviews. They got these sheep. They're gonna like maintain all the fairways and stuff with live sheep. They do a soft open in 1918. It doesn't go well. They got to close the course back down. They get some extra help to finish the golf course. They reopen in 1919. But yeah, so Hollins is, she's out there. She's doing everything, organizing tournaments. Probably most famous so Marion Hollins developed Cypress Point, and she was like the one person, the one lady membership committee. So they kind of deferred to her, the Del Monte Corporation and Samuel Morse, these guys that were trying to get Monterey going. They deferred to her on who the member should be for the first Cypress Point. She was she was the connection with Alistair McKenzie. She's the one who famously when Bobby Jones went out to play in the U.S. Amateur at Pebble Beach in 1929, he was the heavy favorite. He gets knocked out in an early round. He goes over to Cypress Point to check the place out because he's heard of McKenzie. Hollins puts them together. Bobby Jones obviously likes what he hears, and he brings Alistair McKenzie on board to build this new course in Augusta, Georgia. But so Pebble Beach, they host, definitely because of Marion Hollins, I think, they host U.S. Amateurs in 1940 and 1948, but they also had their own women's event from 1923, so basically right after Pebble Beach opens, until 1951. They have the Ladies Pebble Beach Championship. Hollins wins 7 of them. There's no question. She's a big baller out there. She's dominant in these events. But yeah, it was a pretty prestigious event. And looking at where we are now with ladies amateur golf, I always think like there's a real opportunity there, especially for like top clubs when everybody wants to start another men's 4-ball invitation. Everybody wants to cater to the C-suite guys. You got the Crump Cup, you got the Coleman Cup. There's a lot of those.
The cocktail tour, baby. We could start a cocktail tour for the ladies.
Yeah, like there needs to be. So if you got a club out there, you're trying to raise your profile a little bit. You're proud of your new course that just opened. What about somebody needs to step up and be like the Crump Cup for women, like for mid-ams.
Hell yeah, Mr. Wolfie, get them. Get their asses. I love it.
Talk about people that like history. Holderness and Bourne. We were talking about pants out at the U.S. Open. I was running around with some of your C-suite buddies out at U.S. Open. I was asking about these pants. They're called the Warner pants from Holderness and Bourne. I said, what's Warner mean? I know about the organic cotton. I know about the recycled performance yarn that goes into making the pants. Holderness and Bourne, these guys are golf sickos like I am, like I think you are. They named their pants after Milton Pierpont Pippi Warner, who played golf for Yale, led them to the national championship 1932 and 1933. Pippi Warner wins the North and South Invitational in 1932. So Holderness and Bourne, that's the kind of people you're dealing with there. They don't just say they love golf. They know their golf. They pick out crazy names for their stuff. I like that. Today, I'm wearing the Bird shirt, B-Y-R-D, a little Jonathan Bird homage there. It's a good fit.
Listen, I got my multi-print on NLU logo, but they've got some good multi-prints. This one, they got darts. If you want to throw darts, they got tees. They got palm trees. The one I'm wearing is palm trees.
Listen, the palm tree one.
Founders, Alex and John, they're Yale guys. I'm a Columbia guy. I'm not going to hold that against them. Name and close after Pierpont. That's a name you don't hear much anymore unless you went to Yale. But yeah, you know what? I appreciate that they do good work, and it's our best-selling stuff in the NLU Pro Shop. So shout out to H&B.
Yeah, thanks to H&B for sponsoring the program. Thanks for their interest in golf history. Some contemporaries of Marion Hollins, I want to shout them out just because they didn't really get their due, I don't think, because there was not a U.S. Women's Open at the time. But some of these people are just absolute ballers. So Glenna Colette Vare, she wins 6 women's amateurs. She's the runner-up twice. All this, by the way, happens kind of between World War I and World War II. You got Virginia Van Vie. You got Alexa Sterling. They both win 3 U.S. women's amateurs. Just want to put their names up there.
We don't name people like we used to. Virginia Van Vie, Glenna Colette Vare. I believe there's an LPGA trophy named after her.
There is the award. It's like the Varden Trophy for the LPGA Tour. So lowest scoring average for the year is the Vare Trophy. It's named after Glenna Colette Vare.
I wish they were still running that Pebble Beach Ladies Championship, though.
They still do some pretty interesting stuff out at Pebble Beach with the first tee tournament and some stuff like that. Some pretty creative stuff. And I think Women's AM at Bel Air, I think it's a banger. I think it's going to be a great one. I'm glad they're playing Pebble this year. I was when I was getting ready to do some research on, for the show, I was kind of curious on the top clubs, how these guys done with supporting the ladies game. I was pretty impressed with what I saw. So on the women's AM side, it was pretty much big name host courses right from the get-go. I mean, Shinnecock hosted the ladies AM 1900, their first one. Brookline has been hosting women's AM since 2002. Marion in 1904. And then once the Women's U.S. Open started, Wingfoot hosted it for the first time 1957, Baltusrol 1961. So credit where credit's due. I think there's a huge opportunity, and this is not an original Bama Bearcat idea, but it's been bandied about before. But I think there's a real opportunity to go to other really cool old school clubs that can still host a women's event, the scale of the women's event, both the course size and kind of the shot making skills of the ladies versus the men's, with distance, with how high their ball, the ball flights are, stuff like that. And also like the crowd sizes and just the manageability of it. A Myopia Hunt Club, a Camargo, San Francisco Golf Club. I would like to see some of these places that are never ever going to have a professional men's event. But man, that would be pretty cool.
Yeah, some golden age places, some places you hear the name of, but we don't get to see a lot on TV. What should I look for? A specific hole or specific shot that'll be different than what we see the men playing this course? Like, will there be any specific holes that are played very different, or will the course strategy be different for the women versus the men?
Yeah, that's a good question. So off the top of my head, I would say the par fives, right? The par fives at Pebble are, pretty darn good collection. 6 in particular, there's no question. Just one of the major differences between the men's game and the women's is just the swing speeds. And higher swing speeds don't just affect distance; they also affect trajectory of the ball flight. I mean, the faster you can get the club through the ball, the higher the ball is going to go in the air. 6 is an interesting par 5 because that second shot is so steep up the cliff, and it's one of the times I've gotten to play Pebble Beach. It's pretty daunting. I mean, once you get there, and it's like, man, it would be really easy to catch this 5-iron a little thin and hit it right into the face of that cliff on 6. I think for major championships, I think the par 5s are always it's one of the harder setup ones, but it's also the most potential where, like, I like in a major championship when there's only like 5 guys that you get on one of the holes,
Sure.
and have like eagle chances, like the whole league. Like, I think, Tiger, the Tanimal shot, obviously, that's really, I think, where the great can separate themselves from the good.
Not just irons, long irons and hybrids. Watching them hit 5 irons to 15 feet is, entrancing. It's incredible. Highly recommend, if anybody has a chance to get to an LPGA event or a women's major or the U.S. Women's Open, take it. It's a ton of fun to go to a women's event. You can get up close. I've always felt like I wasn't around for this, but every time I've been to a women's event, it felt like what I imagined the PGA Tour was like in the 70s. Yeah. Still kind of a traveling circus. Everybody's friendly. You get out like by the range, and I don't know, they're just all a little bit more welcoming and like, hey, thanks for coming. All right, well, what about some fun facts? I love fun facts, Mr. Wolfie.
All right, so U.S. Open, we got fun facts for the U.S. Open. The clickbait one, it was an early banger on the Bama Bearcat Twitter site, was Lexi, right? Lexi played in her first U.S. Open when she was 12 years old. She's played in every one since then. So every year you see the stat. This year she's 28 years old. She's already played in 16 U.S. Opens. When she gets to be 50 years old, she'll have played in 38 U.S. Opens if she keeps playing. It's kind of crazy. We're going to go deeper than that, though. Office hours, you spend time around campus in the summer. You deserve a little bit better than just
deep cuts, man.
So here's a crazy one. First 37 women's opens, right? There's only 2 non-Americans that win in the first 37 times the U.S. Open's held. One of them, as I'm sure you're aware, is the daughter of the crocodile, Renee Lacoste, with the alligator and the tennis and all that stuff.
Sure.
His daughter wins the U.S. Open as an amateur. She's still the only amateur ever to win the U.S. Open. The other lady that wins, that's a non-American in the first 37 years the U.S. Open's held, is the great Faye Crocker. Any guesses, Neil? Any guesses from the class where Faye Crocker is from? Not from America, not from France. Only other place to win a U.S. Open the first 37 times it was held for the ladies. Where's Faye Crocker from?
I'm going to guess Australia.
False. She's from Uruguay.
Oh, man, I know you love that. I know you love getting down in South America, Mr. Wolfie.
So her father, Frederick, he's a farmer down in Uruguay. He's the 27-time champion of the Uruguay Open. Her mom, also Menace, she's a 6-time champion of the Uruguay Open. Faye wins 20 national championships of Uruguay on her own. So between the three of the Crockers down in Uruguay, they've got 53 Uruguayan national titles. Faye Crocker comes up here. She's a pro. She turns pro. She's, she's around tour. She hangs around, has a decent stint on tour. But Faye Crocker gets it done. She wins the 1955 U.S. Open, brings the title back to Uruguay.
How about that?
Uruguay still today has more U.S. Women Open titles than Scotland has. Scotland's got 0. No Scots woman has ever won a U.S. Open. No Irish woman has ever won a U.S. Open. 2 English women have won. Laura Davies in 1987, Alison Nichols 1997. Only 2 folks from Great Britain, Ireland that have ever won a women's U.S. Open.
Big Randy's going to love that. He's on record as saying that the English major record is just, it's a disgrace, I believe is the term he used.
Well, Scotland, I mean, birthplace of golf, and they got to step it up. They got to get, they need a, they got to get somebody over here on the ladies' side to get one done. It's been a minute, and the clock's still running on this.
Now I want to move to USGA.
Okay.
Big deal about purse sizes these days.
Big deal.
And pay equality. How are we doing? Where set the scene for me on where we're at with purses.
Yeah, so another pretty big jump up in recent years, obviously. It was bleak at the beginning. I mean, it was bleak a lot of places. Over in the UK, everybody basically compared to the U.S. Men's Open was pretty small. But the Ladies Open. So basically, from when they began this thing at the end of World War II, all the way through the early 60s, the total purse, they were playing for like $7,000-8,000 total purse. It doubled. I don't know why. I tried to find this out in my research. It doubled. It jumped from $9,000 to $18,000 in 1965, and then really by the time you get to the 70s, it starts rolling. So they passed $100,000 in 1978 for the first time. They got to $500,000 by 1990. They weren't even playing for $1 million until 1995.
And that's remember, total purse, though.
This is total purse.
That's
I'm not
for the
talking
winner.
about the winners. This is total purse.
But 95, the only, wasn't that the year Curtis Strange, first time anybody made $1 million on tour?
Yeah, that sounds right.
Yeah.
Right around that time, yeah. So, $1 million total purse, 1995. First time the ladies played for $1 million for the winner. First time the winner got a check for $1 million was 2019. From 2021 to 22. So in 21 it was $5 million. In 22 it's $10 million. They lost their title sponsor this year, kind of a bummer, but and I know that's a priority for them to try to replace that. But so they're up there, and I'll say I think it's working. I mean, this idea again, credit where credit's due to the USGA and the folks that have worked hard on this. But I think there was a few years there where the USGA had gotten so far ahead of everybody else in ladies golf that like financially the impact from winning the Women's Open was. It was almost like to the point where it was back to being the only major for the women. I mean, it was like there was a mega major, and then there were the 4 other majors, and the U.S. Open was far ahead of everybody else.
Well, they might have too many majors, but that's probably something we could talk about.
Yeah, peer pressures work though. So the USGA, they doubled the purse, take it from $5 million up to $10 million for the Women's Open, and it basically just forced all the other women's majors to kind of step their game up, and so good on them for taking the lead on that. Title sponsor for a national championship. I don't know if I'm thrilled with that idea in principle, but a buck's a buck, and you got to do what you got to do sometimes. So I think that's probably going to be back the title sponsorship. If it helps more ladies be able to play professional golf for a living, then I think that's something we can live with.
Well, tell me about some favorites. I mean, do you see any on the any dark horses coming from across the pond?
I'm gonna go pretty chalky here and say Rose Zhang. I think it'd be good for the sport. I think it would be a pretty
Team
cool
Rose.
story. And she's got the course record already. She's from Stanford. I'm gonna say Rose.
I mean, all this stuff's scripted. We know that, so it makes sense that it's Rose. If you read the internet, it's all scripted. So it just sets up perfectly. Like that's why she went pro like 2 months before. It's all gonna lead up to this. It's great.
Neil, don't be reading the internet. You know what you need to do instead of reading the internet? Read books.
Hell
right?
yeah.
So we got champion in a man's world, David Outerbridge, 1999. We got the Pacienta story. If you want to know a little bit more about Marion Hollins, this one's a little bit tougher. This is probably a $100 book. It's out of print now, but a lot of good stuff in there. The story of Pacienta, by the way, in Marion Hollins is wild. She makes $2.5 million on an oil speculation right in the middle of the Great Depression. She develops Pasatiempo. In this book, they go over the story, the clubhouse, the original clubhouse in Pasatiempo. We'll put it on the screen right there. If you look at this thing, it's not the one they have now. This thing's unbelievable how big. Pebble Beach, if you want to read up on Pebble Beach, this guy right here, it's sold in the gift shop. They've sold about a zillion of these. So the good news is you can buy this book for like $3. This is one of those books. It's by Neil Huddling, Pebble Beach Golf Links, the official history. The photography inside the book is terrible. They didn't do a very good job with there's great photographs, but like they're all in these horrible shades of brown. But a lot of good stats in there and a lot of good stuff on early Pebble Beach. Like I said, it's like $3. So this is a pretty good one you find in a used bookstore. And then if you want to know about some of the older ladies that we talked about and some of the old school stuff, I'm going to go with an oldie but a goodie. The Essential Henry Longhurst. He's got there's a chapter in the book called I Was There, and it's essentially just a kind of an anthology of his articles he wrote about covering old Walker Cups, Curtis Cups. I think stories about ladies golf are the history is pretty interesting to learn too, because it's kind of the same names and like we're so dominant, and so like they keep, like they have round 2 and they have round 3 and they have round 4 and these battles with each other. And it's not just like somebody gets hot, Scotty Scheffler or Anthony Kim gets hot for 18 months and then somebody else comes along and takes the crown. These ladies were battling it out with each other for decades, and it's pretty fascinating to hear the names of coming back and forth in some of these stories.
Love it. All right.
It's going to be a good week. I think the coverage, fingers crossed, they do right by the ladies. Pebble Beach, certainly a spectacular canvas to play golf on. U.S. Women's Open. Stay tuned. Going to be a lot of great content from the boys that are out there. I think Tron's making the trip. KVB's making the trip. Randy, of course, will be there. I heard celebrity guest appearance from Jordan, so that'll be fun. Hear her take on things. And U.S. Women's Open coming soon.
Thanks, Professor Wolfie.
Neil, thanks for paying attention. Enjoyed having you in the class.
Gotta get that D to a C. C's get degrees. That's what my coach told me.
Exam season coming. Study up.